So I was in Cuba, speaking of revolutions, and I was at the Bay of Pigs when Russia decided to invade Ukraine, and I was just looking out at the Bay of Pigs, thinking, so this is how it happens. This is poetic.
Yeah.
I had to pull out a pen and write, and didn't have the best Wi-Fi. Got a SIM card. Finally went online, and deep in like reading Che books, like guerrilla warfare again while I'm there, and this history of the mafia in Cuba, and just seeing how like real revolutionaries did it, and the conversations and the diary notes, and thinking like this is how they really did it back then. I read it when I was in college, and it's different now. And then I go online, and it's like the left is like real revolutionaries do XYZ. The propaganda has really been killing me, and I don't blame everybody. I think what's getting under my skin and a lot of other folks, and finally it's being written about in a much more aggressive way. Little stories pop up here and there, David Crosby getting off of Spotify, Neil Young, etc., tied to the propaganda coming out of Joe Rogan's mouth about COVID. But now people are actually writing about the ecosystem, how it's structured, and how literally like 3% of influencers, let's say propaganda influencers, and there's types, can really dictate 65% of the conversation online. And there's been a lot more research around this, and it's much more than 3%. But the Soviet propaganda, and I'm not talking about Russia today, I'm saying Soviet propaganda, was extremely sophisticated, as is our propaganda. I'm not discounting that. But the lack of nuance when it comes to foreign policy is it's reactionary. I mean, Francesca, I know you've worked abroad extensively and lived abroad, and I have too, and it's frustrating because the internet doesn't really allow a lot of space for nuance, and this is an extremely sensitive time.
Yeah. Oh no, it's bad on nuance. I mean, that's the whole thing. Like, you tweet something with nuance, like nobody retweets it. You tweet something like, well, Russia's just defending itself, like everyone's like, well, maybe they've got a point, and like, if you take a strong, uninformed stance, you will get a lot of retweets. Yeah. And if it's negative, even better. So, but yeah, it's interesting because I think there is a little bit of a coming to Jesus moment about kind of the enemy of my enemy is my friend crap politics that I think a lot of progressives and leftists, so-called leftists, have. And to me, the honest, I was saying this last week, the real reality is that like we don't have an anti-war movement. We don't have, we got an amalgamation of podcasters and hosts and people online and influencers. Are we really organized? Not really.
No. And we don't have labor either. I mean, there's a militancy also, in that you learn how to be a better activist when you have a militant movement. And I say militant not with weapons, but with organized labor teaches you how to organize and create solidarity and trust people and message and know who to trust and not trust. And that was actually the most interesting part of being in Cuba, reading these diaries, is like they were talking about the same stuff we're talking about as they were, building their movement that was getting slaughtered, especially in the first like few months, majority wise. I mean, they were not in a strong place at all, and had to build that militancy. Otherwise they weren't going to survive. And I think, that's the come to Jesus moment we're having right now too. It's
I think social media plays a really big part in that, is because we don't see things in practicality. We don't see things in our everyday lives. And so it's so easy to look at a video or hear an audio clip and say, oh, that was doctored, that was, edited. We don't know what happened right before. And something as basic as people saying Black Lives Matter was co-opted, being like, well, what about, so it's a whataboutism of everything, because I feel like not just Americans, but people all over the world are very individualistic. And it's always about me and my survival until you feel as though that's being threatened. Then you look for an ally, and by that point it's too late.
And it's a form of privilege too. I mean, I'm seeing a lot of people saying, well, what about Libya, and what about Iraq, and what about Afghanistan? It's like all of those are very different things. And if you're so privileged that you don't understand the difference between those wars and what got us into those wars or didn't get us into those wars, or what caused these scenarios, then that is a point of privilege that you're using too, because you're so disconnected from the actual movements on the ground there. And I understand where it's coming from. and it's almost predatory by the propagandists that they're preying on folks who want to do more or are insecure or some of
don't want to
bots.
speak out because they're afraid, like, oh, they're not informed on everything. Like, all you need to do is look at what's fucking happened. It's pretty clear. Like, it's easy to be in solidarity, I think, with the Ukrainian people. But yeah, there's a grand flattening that happens in terms of a moral and like wars to wars. We're like, no, it's all the same thing. It's all U.S. imperialism. We're like, how is this U.S. No, it's imperialism. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/bitchuation room. Do it.